Welcome to Rice TVX. On today's Rice Report, I am joined by the Chief Market Analyst at ITM Trading, Miss Lynette Zang, for a live interview. Going to get her thoughts on what's going on with the Federal Reserve, with inflation, where we are currently at, what's happening next, and then we're going to be talking a little bit about some CBDCs and wherever else the conversation takes us. Before we begin, a few quick messages from the sponsors of Rice TVX.
Cryptocurrency, DeFi, NFTs? Sounds confusing? BitLab Academy is here to help. We make it simple. Start investing in crypto, learn trading fundamentals, learn to mint and trade NFTs. Join our community today. Crypto for beginners, taught by the pros.
And you can always find information for the sponsors in every video description. I'm always going to thank BitLab Academy, Monarch Wallet, and Presearch. Be sure to smash that like button because it does help other people to be able to find these kind of videos and Rice TVX in the YouTube algorithm flow. Going to give everybody time to get situated in today's live stream. I urge you to take advantage of my partnership with My Patriot Supply. And right now you can save $250 on a 90-day emergency food kit, or you can save $50 on a 30-day emergency food kit. Right now, you can save $250 on a 3-month food kit from My Patriot Supply. It is their lowest price in 3 years to help you fight inflation. Go to prepwithrice.com and get your $250 savings on this 3-month emergency food kit. That's prepwithrice.com. We have coming food shortages, global food supply chain issues, fertilizer is scarce and expensive, farming problems. Be smart, be prepared, not scared. You can also save $50 on a 4-week emergency food supply. Visit prepwithrice.com. And I will include links for everything we talk about on today's show. So without further ado, my guest is Miss Lynette Zang. She is a Chief Market Analyst over at ITM Trading. Miss Lynette Zang, thank you for coming back on the show. How are you today?
I'm excellent, Chris. It's been kind of entertaining as we were talking about, but I'm very happy to be here. So thank you for having me.
No, thank you so much. And you actually, we had some incredibly funny laughs before we started, and that may continue in the course of today's conversation because I think a lot of what we're dealing with in reality is enough to make people kind of go a little crazy and question what's actually happening, go a little loopy. I mean, everything from our federal government, White House, Janet Yellen, changing the definition of words like recession to pretend like we're not in a recession. And the more I thought about that, aside from changing the definition, we're not really in a recession, because something that you mentioned the last time you were on was hyperinflationary depression. So depression is where I think we're headed. What are your thoughts on just that? The last time you were on with hyperinflationary depression, do you feel as is that coming, or is it happening? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that for some, we're already there, and we've been there since, quite honestly, 2008. There are many people that are there. But I think that, no, I've not changed my opinion on that. I do believe that we are already at the beginning of the hyperinflationary phase. And what we don't know is what black swan event, which could happen with energy, quite honestly, but what's going to push us over the edge so that we can't recoup? And here's the other thing, Chris. We make this assumption that the central banks and the government want things to stay the same, and yet their policies are in absolute opposition to each other. So you have the Fed fighting for its credibility. I mean, this is really, I think, the biggest risk that we have right now. You've got the Fed fighting desperately for its credibility, and the only tool that they really have is raising interest rates. At the same time that you have our government with the inflation fighting bill, which does absolutely the opposite. And I love these commercials that come on TV saying how families are going to save $1,800 a year in their energy bills. But what they don't say is, yeah, that's 10 years. Right now, we're going to pump billions and 437 billion, but likely more in the other programs with enabling. Okay, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but the government, all of their programs are about spending money. And even on the student loan debt, taking away $10,000 from each individual, what that could easily do is put them in a better position to buy a house. In other words, buy a falling knife. They're coming up with all of these programs. Bank of America is now testing a no down payment mortgage because I guess we didn't know how that worked from 2007, 2008. Let's test it again. But this time they're going to give them $10,000 to $15,000 worth of equity, because having something given to you that you didn't have to sweat blood and tears to accumulate makes it a lot more valuable. And I'm being completely facetious.
Right.
Right. So there are all of these programs that are going on that create inflation at the same time that the Fed is supposedly raising rates to fight inflation. And does that mean that they have to raise them more?
Good question. So you did watch the Jackson Hole speech. The Fed chair, Powell, talked about more pain to come, bringing the pain to households and businesses. What are your overall thoughts? I know you did make a video over on ITM Trading, and again, we're going to talk about your channels towards the end of the conversation, but I definitely encourage people to make sure you're subscribed to ITM Trading and Beyond Gold and Silver. I just screen shared them, and they will be shared throughout the video. No problem. But what are your thoughts on what I don't even want to call him Mr. Powell, but what Powell said in Jackson Hole, which really had it wasn't a scheduled meeting. It wasn't an official Fed release or anything to that effect. It was just technically his personal opinion.
Well, what I thought was really interesting was that he used the term price stability 9 times in this 10-minute speech. So every time you turned around, it was price stability. Now, if you're talking to a normal person, right, and you hear the term price stability, what do we think? We think prices just stay the same. They're stable, right? But what the Fed really means by price stability is a level of inflation, and that's where that 2% target and now average goes, so that you as a worker do not demand more money from employers when you're seeking employment. That's price stability. Now, let us not talk about the corporate executives to workers pay and how it used to be 20 to 1 and it's now on average 360 to 1, but with many getting thousands to 1 on workers pay, because we certainly shouldn't do that. And let us not also talk about the massive profits that these corporations have been generating on the backs of everybody else. And I don't know, I'm pretty sure that would not really contribute to inflation prices. I mean, what do you think, Chris?
No, not at all. Not at all. So it can't be.
Yeah, that speech was just a dog and pony bringing out that word. I mean, why would you mention price stability 9 times in a 10-minute speech? It's because you're trying to deliver that message that you want more unemployment. And this soft landing, this is really interesting, actually, because I've been looking at this lately. That soft landing that he's talking about is by trying to get workers back into the pool of employment. the workers that are already employed, they want them to remain, but they want new workers coming back in. And, you know, I was reading some things about that. And I wonder if, because we've suddenly seen a spike in new entrants into the employment market, and I wonder if that isn't some meme millionaires or crypto millionaires that now were sitting back and they didn't have to work because they were making so much money hand over fit in the meme stocks and the currencies. But now, because we're inside of a crypto winter and the meme stocks aren't doing so well, that those people are forced back in the labor force.
Man,
I don't know if that's really true, but
I don't know, but you're using all this crypto lingo. You sound like you've been getting into the crypto since you're talking about the crypto winter, which, you know, we definitely are in. And what you mentioned, it's a possibility, but the other possibility is too gearing up for seasonal work. Because there's been a lot of talk that after we come past the holiday season, after Christmas time, and people start getting laid off from the seasonal work, is when we'll start seeing a lot more of those problems in the employment market, you know, because we have midterm elections getting ready to come up. So they're going to do everything they can to manipulate numbers to look good as they're going into the actual elections. Because right now we have primaries getting ready to start happening locally. And then there's going to be the big actual Democrats versus Republicans, because that's all it usually is anyways, the red versus blue. And that's what's going to be interesting about what the Federal Reserve is going to have to do moving forward. So we have, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, well, first of all, I like to say that I know people don't necessarily realize this because I don't talk about it a lot, but I've been following cryptocurrencies since the beginning. So I've been paying attention.
When you first started talking about the Chinese SDR back in 2017, right? And you kind of backed away from it on the channel, but I know that research-wise, based off, you know, things that we've talked about, that you pay attention to all financial markets.
Exactly. Well, and especially since this really, in my opinion, and having studied currencies, currency life cycles, and how they make a transition from one system into another system, which is really what we're going through right now. It's all part of it, because that was really what was created to get people comfortable with that market. And the tactics that they used or allowed are the same tactics that they've used over and over and over and over again. So it's really, it may be a crypto versus debt fiat, but it's the same thing. It's how do you make that transition, get people comfortable with it, get them to go along with it, and not give you any pushback. So yes, I have to pay attention to that. I have to pay attention to all of it. But the biggest challenge with the Fed is having given up their credibility to Wall Street a few months ago, when they did a 75 basis point move, when they kept telling the markets that they were going to do a 50 using their forward guidance, right? Which is a tool that they created after 2008. Well, they didn't create it then, but they used it extensively since 2008 to let the markets know what they were going to do so that they could get into a position, and number one, help them with that policy, and number two, to benefit from that policy. I mean, that's what we've seen, you know, right along. And, you know, what I'm seeing now is that when they did that, and Wall Street said, wow, we can't trust what they're going to say anymore. They volunteered a key tool, which really shocked me. But it is a sign of how desperate the central banks are. And they fully admit that they don't really understand inflation either, but that genie is out of the bag. And you can't put it back in so easy. And
well, go ahead. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you know me. I can keep going. Here you.
We'll okay, just logical thinking. If you understand what's really fully going on, then you really understand the end result, which is what you've been preaching for years, since I've, you know, started watching you and then been able to, blessed to have these conversations and interview you. There's a guy named Nick Carter It's not from NSYNC. I know you're a huge NSYNC fan, Lynette Zang. This is a Nick Carter in the financial area, and he was on Anthony Pompliano's podcast on his YouTube channel recently. And there's a clip on his channel that I'll try to include later in this video. But something that he said, and it spelled it out really simple. And I'd like to get your thoughts on this because we have what was said at Jackson Hole. We have the FOMC. Actually, first we have the CPI data coming out in about a week, September the 13th. And then the next FOMC meeting will be the September 21st and 22nd, which will determine what happens with the interest rates. So Nick Carter says the Fed is in a tight spot. The Feds can't raise rates to whip inflation without bankrupting everything. There's so much sovereign and corporate debt that high rates would create insolvency quickly. He said in the 70s, because a lot of people are comparing this to the 70s, Volcker raised rates 20%. He says, now, if we were to raise rates in the United States 5%, the United States government would default. He said the debt to GDP is 120 as opposed to 30 in the 70s, and the deficit is around 7% this year as opposed to the 2 to 3% in the 70s. And so that they would definitely have to reverse course at the latest Q4 this year. Your thoughts?
I agree with everything that he said. I'm not sure whether or not they will reverse course in Q4 because their credibility is on the line, and that's the problem. So it's like a drowning man that's in a lake. And, you know, if you jump in to save him, what is he going to do? He's going to take you down with him. So I think that that's really what we're dealing with here, which is why, you know, I agree with everything, 100% of everything else. But what he didn't say was we were also transitioning into a new financial system in the 70s. Right.
Yeah,
and that's what nobody else goes there. Right. And I don't know why. There's all these comparisons to the 70s and the 80s. And I was around then, and I remember the greedy 80s. It was getting everybody into the system, allowing enough people to make massive amounts of money on this new system. So who complained? They did the same thing in the 1920s, right? Roaring 20s. Happy days are here again. So, you know, I'm just not fooled by that because it's simply a repetition of history. And I would agree. If it isn't Q4, it's that danger piece. It's that danger piece. The battle for that credibility that they so easily gave away when they didn't really have to. They just had to give them a little more of a heads up unless they really are completely behind the 8 ball. And what I really do think is that, well, this is what I know. I 100% know that we have to have a big enough crisis that scares the bejeebies out of everybody so that they will go along with this next piece that they want to put us in, the CBDCs, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so when you have the Fed working in one direction and you have the government working in the opposite direction, when a couple of years ago they were working in the same direction, does that tell you that this is intentional?
It seems like something is going on. And then when we think about how the inflation is, even though the CPI numbers went down over the last information from 9.1 to the 8.5 number, it's still high. How is it that the DXY is continuing to do this? Like we just hit $1.10
raising the interest rates.
So it's all interest rate related. So the more we raise interest rates, the stronger the dollar gets, which really affects even our ally nations because it inflates their money even further. So it kind of goes on that whole saying that I've heard many people say that's hard to really explain, is that the strength of the dollar will be the death of the dollar.
Correct. Because at the same time that you have the strength of the dollar, that is masking the loss of purchasing power in that 8.5 or, you know, whatever official numbers there are. Because also officially, there's 3 cents left in the purchasing power out of that original dollar. Right. So this chart reflects the dollar against other currencies. And so the other currencies against the dollar are weak and getting weaker. But as the Fed raises interest rates, the dollar and dollar products are more attractive to investors. And then, so that makes the dollar even stronger. So you're absolutely right. The strength in the dollar, but do not make a mistake in thinking that that means the dollar is actually really strong. It's strong against other currencies, against what you can buy with it. That's the real trend. And you can find that on the Federal Reserve website, Purchasing Power of Consumer Dollar. And you can see that it is losing its value faster than not any other time, but faster than we've seen it lose it since, again, I'll say in the 70s, and then before that in the 20s.
Which Fred chart did you say again?
Purchasing Power of the Consumer Dollar.
Right. I want to go because we've talked about this before, but I want to go ahead.
Oh, this is like probably my very favorite chart.
I think
because
it is.
It really does. And look, if you think there's really 3 cents left in the dollar, then think again. But okay, so there it is from the beginning. And if you take 1 0 off on that left hand piece, then you can see there's your dollar. See it?
Right. When it says 1,000, it
correct.
Just take the 0 off and it would be $1. This would be 90 cents, 80 cents, 70, 60, 50, 40, 30. And you can see that it's way down here where that would be 10 cents and that's 0.
Right. Exactly. And now if you could on the bottom see that little, yes, that. Move
take it
that
to
all
what
the
year?
way over because it looks like it's kind of flat. So, keep going, keep going, keep going. Okay, stop it.
I'll pull it back just a little bit.
Right. So this is
you can still see where the downward action is going from, like where it was basically 47.5 cents, a little below that.
Well, okay. Actually, you've got to move the decimals. So it was 0.0475 cents. So it was almost 5 cents to the dollar. Because remember, you have to move the zeros, right? And now we're down officially at 0.0338 cents. And that's since the financial crisis in 2008, which is really when the whole system died. So all that money, all that life support, all their shenanigans, look at this.
Yeah, and as you're looking at this, which is a complete chart going down, and it just keeps going down, then you look at something like this, and you see it going up. But like you said, people don't think about what it's being gauged against. What is the Fred chart gauged against?
Consumer prices.
So the purchasing power of the dollar, how much you can purchase for said dollar.
Exactly. Look at Zimbabwe. It doesn't matter how many Zimbabwean dollars you have. There are billionaires. What am I talking about? Trillionaires in terms of Zimbabwe dollars, but they can't buy eggs. And Zimbabwe just recently came out with a 1 ounce gold coin. Gee, who do you think can afford that gold coin to protect their purchasing power?
No,
certainly not the masses.
Right. It's a crazy part where we're at, as far as, one of the things that you've been talking about is surviving and thriving the inevitable collapse, which seems like we are experiencing.
Well, you can see it.
Yeah.
That's why this is, and look, it coming from the Federal Reserve. Do you think they might have juggled it? Did they kind of tweak it a little bit, the CPI numbers? So, hey, if steak gets too expensive, then you're going to eat ground beef. If ground beef gets too expensive, you're going to eat hot dogs, right? So those are really the numbers. So, it's much worse than what we're seeing.
Oh, I know, because they've been taking out, what was it, the M2 money supply they took out? M3. Okay. It's confusing.
You can go. Why don't you go into the M2 while you're in here?
Okay. Just pull up in the search bar M2.
Yep.
Velocity of money stock or just the discontinued M2?
Well, you can do the discontinued, but they put another one in so it doesn't look so bad.
Okay, because that's what I thought. That's what I was thinking about was the M2 being discontinued.
M2. So, well, that's the velocity. M2V is the monetary velocity.
This is just M2.
Okay, so you can see how much, and this isn't all of this. This is just, checkable deposits and things like that. So this is not the full amount of money that they've been printing, but you can see that like every time they hit a gray bar, what's their answer? Their answer is more debt, and what that debt creates is more new money.
It's interesting. Is would this be? Yeah, I guess this would be about the March timeframe, huh?
Yeah.
Ironically. And
Ironically,
that's when the money printers went burr.
Right. And we thought what happened in 2008 was outrageous. But, you can see that even better on the Federal Reserve, on their balance sheet, because, we were at like about 900 billion in 2007. And then they did 800 billion like in one go, and everybody was absolutely outraged. Well, what they do in 2020? I mean, it makes everything that they did in the past look like chump change. And when we go into this next, when they reverse course, what tools do they have? They always talk about their tools, but they're not specific with them because they don't really have any. They're really restricted. And they're raising interest rates to create more unemployment so that employees can't demand more money when they do go back to work.
Right. No, it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't.
So where are we? We're at the beginning of the hyperinflation, because when they reverse course this time, if they did what they did in 2020 versus 2008, that's it. That's the last little bit of confidence. You better be ready for that, because that's coming.
Now with the midterm election,
it's not in Q4.
Right. Well, with the midterm, and this is the thing that's bothering me with the midterm elections, why wouldn't the Fed reverse course for the sake of the Democrats who don't look good when it comes to the red wave that's coming?
So I mean, credibility.
But I feel like they've already lost their credibility on a lot of different fronts. It's just the people who haven't fully realized that the credibility is gone. They still believe that the Federal Reserve can fix the problem that they created because of the narrative that the mainstream media is putting out, all your different news stations, your financial stations that are part of the corporate world, part of that mainstream narrative. They're pushing that the Federal Reserve will fix the problem they created, and they've got the people convinced of it.
Well, so I'm not convinced. Are you convinced?
No, but unfortunately the majority is where we're at.
Well, that's why, that's why typically you see 80% of the population end up in abject poverty. And food is the single biggest issue for most people. Meds are another big one. I kind of put that under food. But that's why my mantra: food, water, energy security, barterability, wealth preservation, community, and shelter. This is what we need to sustain a reasonable living and lifestyle. And it's critical. It's absolutely critical that people get prepared as much as possible.
So if people go to your beyondgoldandsilver.com, your mantra is there. They can click on each one of these icons. They'll see food, they'll see shelter, they'll see barterability, wealth preservation. I know I'm doing it out of order. Community,
that's okay.
Security, energy, and water. So you can click on each one of these to explore more. And this is a great resource. So I definitely encourage people, when you're checking out the links, if you're not already following Lynette Zang's work, in addition to ITM Trading, make sure you're checking out Beyond Gold and Silver, which also has a YouTube channel that's all about expanding upon your mantras, which I appreciate that side of you.
Well, I think I take a very holistic approach. I mean, this is what I've done for me. After 2008, when I absolutely knew that the system died. So I knew that we were headed into a hyperinflationary depression, because that's what history tells us. I mean, if something happens 4,800 times and you're doing the same thing, I'm thinking it's not different this time.
Right.
So, so I know it's interesting, Chris, because everybody likes to kind of separate those. Oh, well, you're talking about gold and silver. Well, gold and silver are real money. That will help you preserve your wealth and also give you universal barterability. But you've got to have everything. So the gold and silver needs to be your foundation, because it can protect whatever you are choosing to keep in the system, which
Right.
I'm an ex-banker, I'm an ex-stockbroker, and I have none of that garbage at this point in time. That was certainly not always true, but at this point in time, I mean, I understand the game. I'm very grateful that I had that opportunity. But, so now I become an urban farmer. That was not something that I really ever planned on doing in my lifetime.
No, but you've got a straight up legit bug out plan. I mean, you've got a
Yes,
separate
this is where I
location,
am.
right? You're building all these different resources to help you be more sustainable and self-sustainable, which is the most important thing. And obviously those who can afford to do that need to do that. And then that's where the community part kind of comes in as well, because as I've talked with you before, I mean, you're so giving and so big into your community that during 2020, when we had the great toilet paper rush,
Yes.
Lynette Zang was your toilet paper, your savior for your bung. She was giving out toilet paper, helping people out. So that's how forward thinking that she was.
But that's true. And actually, if I guess if you'd gone back to videos from years and years ago, you would have heard me say toilet paper is highly barterable. I don't know why, but it always seems like in a crisis, toilet paper becomes like the thing.
Yeah. A
But
luxury.
also the food and everything that I'm doing, I'm planning for 40 people, because it takes a village to be self-sufficient. One person can't do everything themselves. They can't know everything all by themselves. So it really takes a village. And if you can't afford to do something, like I've been doing, and understand, I've been working on this for a very long time now, then there are communities where, if what you have are your skills and your talents, I know I have people that are part of this endeavor that are bringing their talents and their skills and also their personal hygiene stuff, because I can't supply everything.
Right.
But right. So you accumulate the things that you like to use that help you feel comfortable, so that it gives you a level. Like I had to get a whole bunch of goldfish because my grandson loves goldfish. And so it would be more traumatic for him in this transition if he didn't have his goldfish. So, I know that kind of sounds funny, but you really want to look at, your little creature comforts and those things that give you that warm and fuzzy, and, and create a stockpile of them.
No, that's a smart thing to do. I mean, when you talk about barterabilities, I mean, there's a lot of things that people can be looking at, that there's a lot of things that people can't afford if you start thinking outside the box, because like you mentioned, medicines, bullets, alcohol, tobacco, all those kind of things will go a long way as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I'll tell you, I told you this briefly just in this litany of stuff before we came on, but my puppy, Juliet, was probably bounding through the grasses, because she's a mountain dog now, and she got bit by a rattlesnake. Well, I do have a venom kit to draw it out if you catch it early enough, but what I didn't have was snake venom, or like the
anti-venom,
to reverse it, right?
Yeah,
So it showed me a hole. Right? Because now I will see what I can do to make sure that I have some on the property, so that should, God forbid, that happen, or it happens to humans, or whatever, that we can deal. We have to, because this is a very, very, very remote location anyway. But we just don't know what's going to be available to us when we're going through this hyperinflationary depression. So you need
No,
to,
I agree.
whatever you can think of, whatever you use, look at what you're doing, what you're using. That's how I built my gardens. What am I buying at the store? Okay, can I grow it? Okay, then that's what I'm going to grow. So what do you use? But you do need a foundation of real money, physical gold, physical silver in your possession, because frankly, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. And it's universal, right? It's universal. I can go anywhere in the world, and I instantly have the same level of purchasing power. And they cannot inflate that away.
Right. No, I mean, hasn't gold been the best performing asset maintaining its price this year?
I think it has,
Or close
but
to one of the best?
But just like that dollar chart, right, that you showed me when the real truth was in the purchasing power,
Right.
it's the same thing with gold and silver. And we're seeing this play out really heavily, the same kind of thing in the energy market in Europe, right? So what you're looking at with spot gold and spot silver, those are contracts. They're cheap, they're easy to manipulate. And you can create all sorts of gold and silver that does not nor ever will exist, and thus suppress the price. And the government and the central banks need those prices suppressed, because if they were actually allowed to express to their true value, well, you know that there are problems with the dollar and you would make different choices. And that's exactly, I was just reading an article this morning that came out on the aluminum and the gas. No, it was the LNG. So the liquid gas prices in Europe, because the derivative markets has them whipsawed, right? They're still able to make their deliveries and do all the things that they need to with the physical gas. But the margin calls, because of what the traders are doing and the level of volatility in that market, it's the derivatives. And that's why the government and the central banks and Wall Street needed these prices to keep going up, was because of all of the derivative bets that are written against these real things. That's what's going to take us down for sure.
So because of derivatives trading, they have to increase what people are paying in the real world to not collapse the derivatives system.
Correct. And now they're talking about in Europe a potential Lehman moment that will be brought on by the energy market because of the derivatives that have been written against the real asset, the underlying asset, and the volatility. So the traders are making all sorts of money. They love that volatility, but the cost to everybody else, the real people operating in the real world, I mean, there's going to be an awful lot of people in huge hurt, particularly in Europe this winter. I mean, I'm off.
Well, that's what
grid
they're
here.
forecasting. That's what they're forecasting.
Yeah.
Now, weren't the derivatives all kind of controlled for the most part, especially in Europe, if not worldwide, through Deutsche Bank? And wasn't that pretty much failing? And then they propped it back up, and now we're having the same problem that we were having it before?
Well, okay, Deutsche Bank is not controlling the derivatives market. They just had the most of any bank.
Okay.
And since all of the banks are incestuously intertwined, what happened to Deutsche Bank is what happened to all of the banks. But derivatives were definitely instrumental in that Lehman moment that happened in 2008. Because there are no limitations on the derivatives. And who creates derivatives and controls whether or not there's an event is the bankers. It's the bankers that own everything.
Right.
Right? So, we have this perception, perception management. You buy a stock, you think you own a stock. You buy a this and you think you own it. Well, frankly, they're all contracts and they all run counterparty risk. And when you have this powerful group that make money on that volatility, don't you remember when oil went to minus 35 bucks a barrel?
In 2020.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then,
what was that? Was
and
it
then
really
what?
nobody wanted oil?
We were hitting all-time highs or hitting highs like last summer.
This is the derivative market. And that's why the markets imploded. It was against mortgages the last time when the liquidity dried up and we ended up with that Lehman moment. Well, the same kind of thing can happen in Europe. And that's why what you're seeing right now are all of these governments in Sweden and Norway, in Switzerland, in the ECB, all of these central bankers and governments are rushing to create maybe a little bit of grants, but mostly like loans and guarantees. So allowing the utility companies to take on more debt to stay afloat. But the problem really goes back to the derivative traders. And that I've said that right along. That's what's going to kill the whole system. Because when I counted it, and this was a long time ago, so this was, I think, in maybe 2009, and then they changed the accounting. There was 1.49 quadrillion in notional value derivatives. And then in 2013, 1.49 quadrillion. And that was like maybe 2009, maybe 2010. Then they changed things. And then in 2013, they came up with this accounting gimmick called compression and netting that made it look like the nominal values of derivatives had gone down dramatically. And you can see all of this in the, you can pull this up too, OCC Q1 2022 for the derivatives in the FDIC insured banks. Now, just
I got OCC Q1 2022.
Yeah.
And what else?
Derivatives in the FDIC insured banks.
Derivatives.
I mean, I'm glad I'm such a nerd and I love reading this stuff and I love looking at this stuff because it really uncovers so much of the truth that's hidden. And ignorance does not make you immune. It just leaves you vulnerable. Did you find it?
After you said 2022 derivatives, what was the next part?
Derivatives in the FDIC banks, insured banks. So, people go, but it's insured. My money that I have in there is insured. Well, they don't really have very much to insure it with.
Quarterly report on banking and trading and derivative activity. Would that be it?
That sounds like it. Does it say Q1?
Q1 2020.
Yeah, pull it up. I'll tell you if that's it.
Hold on one sec.
I mean, anybody, and here's the thing. This information is open to anybody. I don't have a special key. You don't have a special key. It's just that most people, there you go. Yeah, pull up that one that came out in June.
To view the current issue?
Recent.
Okay.
Okay, and download the PDF, and then you'll be able to see all these fabulous charts and graphs. Nope.
Nope, wrong one.
Wrong one.
I don't know what I clicked.
I don't either, but see that it says download PDF?
Download, here it is.
Yeah. There you go. Click that puppy. And now open that up. There you go. Now start scrolling. Or you can put in, Control F to find, and you can put in netting. That would be a good one to start with. Now, these banks and the bank holding companies, keep going. You'll see a whole graph. It just makes it easy. But wait, before you do that, go back up. I want to show you something. Okay. You'll notice that's gross negative. Keep going. Keep going.
Keep going up.
Yeah. Well, first, no, too far. Okay. Keep going a little bit more to the bar chart. Okay. Let's talk about this bar chart for a second. This is bank trading revenue as a percentage of consolidated holding company trading revenue. It is over 50%. I think this year, oh yeah, here you go. The first quarter of 2022, banks generated 70.4% of their revenues from trading in those derivatives.
Yeah, no, I see that.
That's a pretty darn important market for these banks where you feel nice and safe because they have FDIC insurance. It's smoke and mirrors, this whole thing. Okay, now scroll down. Now scroll down.
Okay.
Keep
The
going to
interesting
your
thing with the
knitting.
FDIC is that if too many banks have problems and the FDIC has to step in, it will bankrupt a nation,
Correct. You got it.
which is really alarming to think about.
Well, and we're at the value at risk. The other part of this is whenever you hear anybody say notional or nominal, then what they're really saying is we don't have any idea the true value that's actually at risk. Keep
I don't
going,
think.
keep going.
Okay, because I'm at tables now.
I know. I want you
Okay.
to go to charts and graphs. They're easier to explain as we go through. There you go. Keep going, keep going. Oh, go back up on that one for just a second.
The derivatives nominal type amounts by type?
Right.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. So you see the green lines on the bottom?
Yes.
Those are end user. So those are not trading. So I'm a farmer. I'm growing a crop. It's January and I have to deliver my crop in September. And I have no idea if the weather's going to be good, what the crop is going to be good. So I buy a derivative to make sure that if I have a bad crop, I still am whole and I can plant another crop for the next season, right?
Okay.
That's a legitimate use. They've been around forever. And that is like an insurance policy. But if you look up at the orange line and the black line, well, the black line is total derivatives. The orange line is speculative derivatives. Speculative.
Okay. Can
See,
you? Yeah, that sounds crazy.
Dealer trading.
Speculation on imagination.
You know, so they're not giving these derivatives up, and that is a time bomb. And when you go back to 2008, the level of derivatives, and we'll do a control F on the netting so you can see it for yourself.
Well, I did.
Pardon?
I did a control F, and there's like 30
but
different.
I think we missed it because I know it's in there because I just used it recently, and they always have that graph in there. And you'll see a jump. Okay, go down some. So you can see it's higher and you've got these banks speculating. They're trading. And guess what? When you make a deposit into your bank account, the banks have a right. Reg D gives the banks the right to sweep those funds into sub-accounts that are in the bank's name. And then they get to use your equity for this.
Yeah.
Feel good?
Yeah, no, not at all. No, I know how the banking system works. I'm not a big fan.
Totally. You know, and hopefully this will open the eyes. Scroll down. I want to show you something really interesting.
Okay.
Keep going. I mean, it talks about the few banks that control all of this. Wait, oops, go back up just to that blue one.
This one here?
The netting one?
Netting benefit.
Yep, that's the netting benefit. If you can make that, so you can see the whole graph. They came up with this new formula in 2013, and it makes the derivatives look a lot smaller because they're saying, well, if this guy has this derivative over here and this derivative offsets it, well, then they just negate each other, right? So that's a netting benefit. And in my opinion, very strong opinion, all it does is mask the amounts that are truly at risk. But look at that spike going into 2022.
The last one.
Yes. Well, the last two.
The last two, yeah. It climbed up immensely. The last three, you can see that the third to last was fairly low. The lowest, in fact. And then it just like bounced up. And
Correct.
And it even looks like it doubled up from there.
Scroll down and I'll show you why.
Okay.
Keep going.
Keep going. Okay.
Keep going.
Yes,
I'll tell you
ma'am.
when to stop.
Yes, ma'am.
Isn't this fun?
It's so much fun.
It's so much fun. Here we go. This is the one. Look.
I appreciate that you know this stuff.
I appreciate that I know it too. I really like my age. I do. I like my age because I can look at history. Like I was up 16, 17. I was an old enough teenager in the 70s to not understand what was going on, but certainly to remember it. So
you're like my favorite grandma.
Thank you.
I know you're a grandmother, so it's no disrespect in saying that. So it's like you remind me of like a really cool kick-ass grandma.
Thank you. My grandchildren think so too. So what you're looking at is notional amounts of precious metal. These are actually gold contracts.
Okay.
Now they changed the accounting of them, a little rule, and that's why you see this ginormous spike. But when you talk about the price of gold and silver, see that?
Yeah, I went to the wrong chart. I popped off.
You went up to netting, so you were on the gold and silver chart. You were.
That was below though, right?
Precious metals. Keep going.
Okay.
This one. Nope. One more down. One more. There you go. That one.
Okay.
See, precious metals, but what they're really talking about is gold.
All right. Silver's not included in the equation.
Not really.
Okay.
Not really. So they tweaked it because they were treating gold like any other contract, when in reality, it is a physical asset. And so they had to reveal a little bit more. So you see this spike. But when people say, well, how can they suppress the price of gold? Well, I don't even think that what we're seeing there is accurate, because they have all of these different gimmicks.
Right.
Right.
And changing definitions and discontinuing sources and all those sorts of things.
Voila. They don't want you to understand any of this, because if you really do, I mean, once I integrated and realized, and I saw it coming, I saw it back in like 2000, 2001. That's why I went to ITM in 2002, because the formulas and the technicals told me that we were now entering the end of this big experiment. And when do you want to get ready? When a crisis happens, you can't get ready. There's you don't have availability. I mean, aren't grocery store shelves, you showed this in the beginning, there's still grocery store shelves that are bare, right?
There are. And selection is starting to dwindle a little bit.
It is. I know when I would go, because I buy a lot of food for like the homeless in this community and stuff. So I buy things that are like pre-made that you can just rip open, whatever. And I'll grab a couple and there's nothing behind it, where there used to be, the shelf used to be full. So they can hide it a little bit, but I mean.
Well, I know. And I mean, we're hearing about what's happening with Russia, Ukraine, the fertilizer around with farmers, the restrictions, the coming food shortages they're talking about. So, I mean, they're already telling people what's going to happen. That's why me not living in Europe know that in the winter time, it's going to be an incredibly harsh time period for those individuals, a time period that I can't even fathom to even sympathize. All I can do is just try to be compassionate, because I have nothing to compare it against. I've never experienced anything like that. And that's kind of what I was getting at, was no matter what happens, it feels like we're still going to we're still the spoiled rich kid. And I don't feel like we're not going to get the worst of it till the rest of the world kind of gets the shit end of the stick first.
Well, probably we're going to get the worst of it as we lose our status as the world reserve currency and all those dollars flood back home. That's when we're really going to feel it.
I mean, I don't want to keep you on forever, because I would go into the whole BRICS nation thing with the global reserve currency, but we got the CBDC information. I know you just recently did a video. I want to pull up your YouTube channel so I can refer to what people are. So people are like, what is he talking about? So the video that you did here that is called Executive Order CBDC, who stands to profit? Did you? Yeah, you okay? Because I saw the chaos reigns supreme, and I thought that was an interesting thumbnail. I watched it, and I'm really familiar with what's going on in regards to the idea of a CBDC. So we had the executive order, which is Executive Order 14067. And it had to do with the ensuring the responsible development of digital assets. And then there was even a fact sheet that the White House put out just for people like you,
Can I
Lynette.
just say,
they're fact checking you, Lynette.
You must always be careful of how they title something, because what they're actually doing is just the opposite of whatever that title is.
Well, just like the Inflation Reduction Act, which you obviously said, and I've said before, there's nothing really involving affecting inflation, especially on a short-term basis. But that's how stupid they think the general public is, and the majority of public are that stupid because they're buying into it. You know, they don't think about the fact that when that went through Senate, and we have 100 senators, and it happens to be pretty much even, and it voted even, which means that we have a completely divided Senate, and that's not what people are really focusing on. They're just talking about the not so Inflationary Reduction Act, when really we have a problem at the core of this, because all the Republicans said no, all the Democrats said yes, and the decider was the Senate Majority Leader, who happened to be the Vice President, who, as she passed it through, gave the most awful witch cackle. And I just had to say that because that's literally what she did. But yeah, everything is backwards. It's not what it appears to be. Right. And I am a fan of crypto, and I do want to have a crypto focused episode where we can talk about something like Bitcoin versus a CBDC, which is a conversation to come. But CBDCs, I agree, are a problem. So what is your thoughts? And I guess let me connect a few things with the executive order. We have the FedNow information was just, there's been some news coming out recently that they're going to be launching by July of 2023, which is an instant payment service called FedNow between May and July of 2023. And we also have the ISO 20022, which is, from what I understand, an upgrade to SWIFT. So how are all these things connected? Because the SWIFT system has been controlled by the United States, from what I understand. Are we losing control?
Well, I don't know that we'll lose control of the SWIFT system necessarily, but what we do know is that China, Russia, India, etc.,
BRICS nations
have Africa have set up their own SWIFT system. And just so everybody knows that's listening, the SWIFT is a global payment system, and it uses dollars. So I don't think that we will lose control of SWIFT. I just think that its position globally is going to be, and is already starting to be, diminished.
Okay. Well, what I wondered too is if this particular ISO 2, because I'm trying to do a deeper dive into this. I'm wondering if it's going to be kind of like the underlying connection between all the various different CBDCs, because of having like a standard kind of protocol, and being that SWIFT was the intermittent system, and then at the same time they would have to make a way for what the BRICS nation bank is doing to be able to tap into this as well, because they wouldn't want to lose those resources either.
Yeah.
I don't see two parallel systems existing that don't coexist in some sort of, or don't cooperate in some sense.
The central bankers are going to cooperate with each other.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Right.
So the BRICS nation central bankers are going to work with the IMF and all that, as far as I'm concerned.
100%. But I also think it's still going to be the SDR that ends up as the world reserve currency. But the FedNow system was actually, it's going to launch, but it was set up in 2019, and every single person, whether you realize it or not, has a FedNow account.
So this also goes back to the Banking for All Act that was put out around 2020, right?
Yes, exactly. And so then when we go into this next crisis, it's so much easier to push a button and give everybody free CBDCs. And I mean, there have been governments, China, South America, that have actually done that.
Yep. Well, the Olympics, the Beijing Olympics, yeah, they gave out. Yeah.
But what they've also found, which I think is really interesting, and you said we should have a conversation about, cryptocurrencies versus CBDCs, that people were happy to spend whatever was given them, but not so thrilled to refund it, right? And continue to use it.
Right.
So, there's a little bit of a struggle because China came out and said, oh, well, not a problem. We can just work side by side and we can be there together. But then when they discovered that people were really using the services that they had already had, the private crypto services that they had, well, then they kind of changed their tune a little bit and they got more aggressive, which is probably what's going to happen. So
I don't know if you've seen recently, though, Russia and I think Iran have both announced that they are accepting cryptocurrencies for like international payments and things to that effect, especially Bitcoin.
I haven't seen that, but I'll look at that.
Which makes me question a lot of what's actually happening, because it seems like there's so many different battles happening at the same time.
Voila!
Like a globalization versus the Federal Reserve, because it seems like the Federal Reserve is fighting against the World Economic Forum, ECB, IMF agenda. It seems like that. Seems like Russia's doing something very similar. Seems like the BRICS nation banks are, but there's not really any coordinated working together, and you just see all these different kind of battles taking place while in the meantime we're just suffering.
I really wonder about that because they need a lot of chaos. You're looking over here, you're looking over there, you're looking over there, instead of looking at the real root problem, which is the entire globe's monetary system is on extraordinarily borrowed time.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think we've pretty much have borrowed so much into the future that now it's all caught up with us, and there's no way that we could pay the debt that is even in the system that we have, which is absolutely ridiculous that things could even get to this point. And then that's one thing that I started learning about the Muslim culture, is that they won't, and it's something I didn't know about with the banking system either. This is, I guess, one of their biggest gripes why they didn't want to join up with any sort of central banking system, is because they do not believe in usury and debt.
Yeah.
And so there's actually been talk of utilizing things like Bitcoin from Muslim nations because it's not based on usury or debt. It's a different classification of fiat, because it technically doesn't have the same backing, but it separates state from money, which is a really important thing.
Well, it is a really important thing, but I think it also depends on how it's created and how it's supported. That's really what the problem is, right? So when you look at things like gold and silver, they're used in every single sector of the global economy. So it's universal money that has real functionality out in the real world. And when you hold it, there's no contract against it. If you hold the physical metal in your hand, you hold it, you own it. Everything else is counterparty risk. I mean, look at all of the exchanges that have been closing and people can't get their money out of it, right?
Yeah.
So
centralized
this is a
services.
test.
Centralized services, even in the crypto space. So, I mean, again, that just goes to show you the failure points when it comes to centralization. Also, there is a term that they use in their contracts, which basically gives them just basically complete control of your assets, and whatever happens just happens, and it's okay.
Exactly. Well, it's a contract.
Right.
And, who reads the contracts? They don't. So I consider this a big test. I'm not saying that they're not going to survive it, but there's going to have to be changes that are made before it's more viable.
No, I agree. Now,
but gold has got a 6,000-year track record.
It does. That's why
Right.
I support both. I just don't choose a side where
Exactly.
some people are choosing sides. I see the benefit in the technology. And in technology, you've seen, technology is a tool, and
Yes, it
it
is.
in and of itself is not inherently bad or evil. It's the
Right.
intention and the people behind it. So if we've seen a global CBD system,
Huh.
there, I know we're going to see it. There
We're, of
can
course,
be a system that's made for the people by the people. There can be that.
there
We
can
can
be. I
create counter economics, parallel societies. Value is only in a psychological concept of perception. Nothing really
right.
has value. Nothing. Even gold. I love gold. Has use. But as far as value, it's all just something that we as humans have just psychologically agreed has a numerical value when it just is.
Well, yes, let's just expand that a little bit. Because of all of its use,
Oh
you
yeah,
have the
yeah.
broadest base of buyer. That's
Right.
why it's never gone to zero, right? This is still a test. Cryptocurrencies January of 2009 is when Bitcoin was born. And then March of 2009 was when they started their QE experiment.
Exactly. That's what I
So,
was going to say. So Bitcoin has never gone through a season where it's had to deal with the reverse of inflation, which is deflation, where they're raising interest rates and not printing as much. And it's not quite performing the way that most people would expect. But at the same time, we got a lot of manipulation going on in the markets.
thank you.
Something that even
All of the
worries me, even
markets.
with cryptocurrency, is, and I didn't have any clue about how large this entity was, but BlackRock's Aladdin, in charge of like over $21 trillion of global assets, which is more than the actual GDP of the United States. It's more than the GDP of all of Europe. And now they're getting involved in the crypto game. And I
Thank
mean,
you.
the Aladdin can do 250,000 trades per year, billion for forecast per week, and yearly reports. I mean, it's insane. And now BlackRock has gotten access to our personal data, which to me
Mm-hmm.
allows for the AI to include sentiment, which to me is a deal breaker. It just is done. It's the power that we have given, because it's actually
Unbelievable.
since
Yeah.
2008 with the Federal Reserve. I mean, it seems to control the actions of the Federal Reserve.
Well, it's bigger. It's bigger than
Yeah.
anybody, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah.
So do you think that the Fed now, when it comes about, do you think that is going to be the introduction of a CBDC, that they're together, one and of the same?
To the masses, yes. This next big
Because
crisis,
well,
universal income, boom,
this
put it
article is
right in your
saying
account. Sorry.
that the FedNow service also potentially negates the need for the creation of a CBDC. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, they can say anything they
Is that
want.
just more rhetoric being put out because CBDCs aren't a popular topic right now amongst Americans?
Yes. But the CBDC is controllable, is programmable money.
That's the problem. Tracking,
That's
tracing, controllability. What we've seen happen in Canada with the trucker movement.
yes.
They wouldn't need to get any sort of legislation to be able to freeze people's funds. They would just be able to do it based off of, like you said, it's programmable money. That's why I'm not a fan. Not a fan. Not a fan. Not a fan of
Exactly.
going cashless as much as I like cryptocurrencies. The idea of decentralized cryptocurrencies, I don't like the idea. I've told you before. I don't want to go cashless. I'm still really old school. I still like gold and silver. You know, I'm definitely going to reach back out to you about trying to have a conversation sooner than later in regards to a decentralization distributed network, something like Bitcoin, versus a CBDC, and where it can benefit. But I do want to be respectful
Absolutely.
of your time.
Thank you.
I'm gonna have a link for your Twitter account that people can follow you at ITM Trading _Zang. Gonna have a link for ITMTrading.com, the ITM Trading YouTube channel for BeyondGoldandSilver.com, and the Beyond Gold and Silver YouTube channel. Anything you want to share about the aforementioned?
Well, you know what makes us different than really any other gold company and silver company is, number one, everything we do is physical, but We have a strategy that's based on my studies, and I've been studying currencies and currency life cycles since 1989, and it's just based on repeatable patterns. So what we really like to do, our consultants like to do, is help you put your strategy, your personal strategy together. And it's going to be basically the same as mine, but it's going to be geared toward your goals, your circumstance, and what you have to work with. So, and that definitely makes us different than anybody else. This is a long-term relationship. This is not just a transaction. We're going to help you through the other side of this reset.
I love that. I mean, and I love everything that you guys do over at ITM Trading. I love what you're doing. I love how you've been able to expand out and bring a lot of your personal passions into what you guys are doing there at ITM Trading, especially with the whole beyond gold and silver thing. So
thank you.
And I'll have a link for the playlist with all your previous conversations of the channel that you've been on, and everything that we talked about on today's show. Do you have any final thoughts or anything that you want to add to today's conversation before we do wrap up?
You know, I would say that I see a lot of people that kind of are like deer in the headlights because there's so much chaos around that they just really don't know what to do. But honestly, that will not serve you well. You need to get ready. You need to be prepared. And the time to get your wealth insurance or your food insurance or all of those pieces of the mantra is now, while we still have that opportunity. We saw what happened in 2020. That's when I saw I had a hole in my circumstance. So you take those opportunities where you see your holes and you plug them. But please, people, just get ready. I mean, it's here, and I don't know how long we have to continue to get ready, but you want to do it before you can't.
I mean, it's the whole saying of be smart, be prepared, not scared does make sense. It sounds cheesy as hell, but it makes so much sense. If the more that you can prepare for things, I mean, even from just a normal life situation, I try to prepare for disappointment. That's my key to serenity. And if you kind of prepare for those kind of disappointments, then when those things actually happen, you're going to already be ready for them. And it's just going to be just one of those things. You just keep moving forward. But if you're not prepared, then you're kind of like stuck looking around about what am I going to do about this current situation that I have to deal with. So that's what I appreciate you for. I mean, that's why I appreciate everything that you're doing. I mean, even just going through our playlist of all the different interviews since 2018. I mean, there's a collection of variety of things that we have talked about that I think people can still gain something from, even a conversation from 2.5 years ago. So I definitely encourage people to check those out, even your older content. So again, if you guys aren't subscribed over at ITM Trading, as well as Beyond Gold and Silver on YouTube, links will be down below. Make sure you subscribe. Lynette, if you could bear with me 1 second, just going to wrap up the live stream. So ladies and gentlemen, I appreciate you guys tuning in. If you haven't smashed that like button, be sure to smash that like button. If you're not already subscribed to Rice TVX, I ask you one question. What are you waiting for? We are going to go ahead and end today's show, and I'm going to end it the way I like to end it. And that is this. I encourage you to be a blessing to others, to treat people how you want to be treated, be the change that you want to see in this world, set that example, practice change. Much love.